For this final chapter of The Awakening, I will include some general commentary about the book, and I'll also share some of those resources I have in the other text that I sometimes refer to that teachers actually would find helpful if they wanted to actually purchase that book. But chapter 39 begins on Grand Isle. Victor is our character that introduces this chapter. He is hammering, working on patching a corner of one of the galleries. Marquita is nearby. Remember, Marquita is the girl that was on the ferry who had a flirtation with Robert at some point and who was staring at Mrs. Pontellier and Robert when they went to church that day. She's hanging around Victor. So they're on Grand Isle. Remember, Victor is taking care of his mother's property in the off season, and it's early spring, so they're getting ready for the summer to get here. Victor's been telling her all about Edna Pontellier's fancy dinner party, and he exaggerates when he talks about it. He just likes to sort of entertain her with how lavish it was. He talks about how the champagne was coming from huge goblets, and that Mrs. Pontellier was so beautifully dressed. She was like a beauty with diamonds at the head, all around her face, and the other women were just like, charms to her beauty. So it's just sort of try to impress Marquita with how fancy and how rich the Pontelliers are. All this talk, as much as Marquita enjoys hearing it, also makes her jealous. She starts to worry that Victor is in love with Mrs. Pontellier, which is not an unusual thing to worry about, given how much Victor in the past has said that Edna is so beautiful and ravishing. So Marquita pouts a little and she cries, saying, oh, you must be in love with her, but that doesn't matter. All kinds of other men are interested in me. And, it's fine to date married people, so I can just find somebody else. And Victor reassures her that, he doesn't feel that way, that he is fond of her. So they're obviously flirting too. Lots of flirtation. So they're talking about this dinner when all of a sudden Mrs. Pontellier comes around the corner of the house. So imagine their surprise. They are absolutely dumbfounded to see her there. Literally, they had just been talking about her. She seems like an apparition because nobody's there. It's not summer season yet. There she is looking at them, and she just says real matter-of-factly, I walked up from the wharf, I heard hammering, I figured it was you mending the porch, and then she kind of makes a dig about how she used to always trip over the loose planks last summer on the porch. So clearly there's plenty of things for Victor to fix. She says that she has come alone and for no purpose but to rest. So she got over there on one of those little boats that Boudelet, runs people back and forth to the island. She goes out there, and Victor is kind of shocked. He's like, well, there aren't any guests yet. There aren't any rooms ready for people. I can give you my rooms. He's like, you could stay where I stay, which is awkward. And she's like, oh, any corner will do. Just give me a place. And then he's like, well, and you're not going to like just Philomel's cooking because she's just cooking for him. So he's like, I'm not going to be able to offer you what you would normally have when you come here. And so they talk for a moment about maybe Philomel's mother could come help cook since there's going to be more than one person to feed. Also, Marquita gets even more jealous because she thinks to herself that maybe Mrs. Pontellier and Victor are having an affair because why else would she show up in the off season? But she eventually decides that's not the case because Victor is genuinely astonished to see her, and Mrs. Pontellier is completely indifferent to Victor. She does not have any crush on Victor. So then Edna starts asking more specifics about her stay there. She's like, what time are we going to have dinner? I'm very hungry. So, oh, don't bother doing anything for me. But by the way, I'm starving. And then she tells them that she would like to go swimming. And they both say, oh no, it's way too cold. And she's thinking to herself, well, the sun is hot. You know, it would feel good to get in the water, especially if she goes in the morning and doesn't wait until the afternoon. Apparently, it's at the warmest part of the day. And then as she's getting ready to go to the beach, she says to Victor, "I hope you have fish for dinner." So she shows up, she demands a place to sleep, she demands a dinner that will feed her well because she's hungry, and she's requesting fish, which, you know, is, yes, they're on an island and maybe it's easy to get fish, but, you know, you can't assume that people just have fresh fish all the time at the drop of a hat. So she's being very demanding, selfish too, I would say. So right away, Victor says to Marquita, once Edna has gone, like, "I'm going to go to the kitchen and see what I can do. Please go and get Philomel's mother." These women, they have no consideration. She could have sent word. Absolutely. She could have let them know that she was coming. But Edna is not of her right mind. It says here that she had done all the thinking which was necessary. After Robert went away, she lay awake upon the sofa until morning. So when Robert left that note saying, "I love you, goodbye," she did not sleep that night. She laid awake all night long. And she thought to herself over and over, today it's Arobam, tomorrow it will be someone else. It makes no difference to me. It doesn't matter about Leonce Pontellier, but Raoul and Etienne. So she's like, these men, they come and go. I don't care about them. But her children, this is her biggest internal conflict. She understands now what she had meant when she told Adele Ratignolle that she would give up the unessential, but she would never sacrifice herself for her childhood. And remember, she said that the unessential was her life. She would give up her life for her children, but not herself. And we talked about like who you are at your core, like your true being, your self-actualization, that she would never give that up for her kids, but she would give up her physical life, which I think is important at this particular moment. Despondency had come upon her over that wakeful night, so she has become depressed. It has not lifted. There was no one thing in the world that she desired. There was no human being she wanted except Robert. The children appeared before her like antagonists who had overcome her, who had overpowered and sought to drag her into the soul's slavery for the rest of her days. But she knew a way to elude them. She was not thinking of these things when she walked down to the beach. So her kids, her feelings for her kids, she can't shake that. She can sort of, cast off these men, take them or leave them. But her children, she has genuine love for her children. She has a strong tie to those children. She has ways. I mean, clearly she's not dealing with them now because they're at her grandmother's house. But she's not thinking of any of this when she walks down to the beach. These are all the things that she ruminated about when she was back at her little pigeon house. So when she gets to the Gulf, we get a change of verb tense. It goes from, past tense to present tense, and it's actually being written to us as a universal truth. It says that the voice of the sea is seductive, never ceasing, murmuring, inviting the soul to wander in the abyss of solitude. So then we go back to Edna. All along the white beach, up and down, there was no living thing in sight except a bird with a broken wing, which to me, again, seems like a symbol. Edna's broken too. Edna had found her old bathing suit still hanging upon its accustomed peg. So remember, they all have little changing houses down by the beach, and she left her bathing suit there. It's been there all fall and winter, and then she puts it on, which I thought was kind of gross, but whatever. So there she is by the sea, absolutely alone. She cast the unpleasant, prickling garments from her. And remember, I showed you back at the beginning, the bathing suits women wore in those days were like dresses. And she's like, forget this. She takes it off, and she's standing completely naked in the sun, the breeze and the sun touching her skin, the waves inviting her. How strange and awful it seemed to stand naked under the sky. How delicious. She felt like some newborn creature. So this is like a rebirth, opening its eyes in a familiar world that it had never known. So she's transforming in this moment. It's another moment of awakening. The waves are curling around her feet. She starts to walk out into the water, and it is cold, but she lifts her white body and she reaches out with her long, strong strokes. The touch of the sea is sensuous. Again, we're going back to present tense, making this a universal statement for us to consider for ourselves as well. It is sensuous, enfolding the body in its soft, close embrace. So when we read these kind of things from Kate Chopin, it's a way of including us in the moment. It's a way of saying to us, like, we can understand her. We know how she must feel in that water. She went on and on. She remembered the night she swam far out and recalled the terror that seized her. But this time, she doesn't look back to the shore. She keeps swimming. She's thinking of the bluegrass meadow that she had traveled when she was a child, believing that it had no beginning and no end. So she sees her past as she looks out at that water. And remember, she is not Creole. She came from another place. She's not from Louisiana or New Orleans. You know, she grew up in Kentucky, you know, with the horses and all sorts of just more a different sort of life. As she's swimming, her arms and legs are growing tired. Uh-oh. She thought of Leonce and the children. They were a part of her life, but they need not have thought that they could possess her body and soul. How Mademoiselle Reyes would have laughed, perhaps sneered, if she knew that she was swimming out there by herself. And you call yourself an artist. What pretensions, madame? The artist must possess the courageous soul that dares and defies. So she sees herself as courageous in this moment. She's remembering that Mademoiselle sort of teased her for being an artist. The exhaustion is pressing upon and over her. Goodbye, because I love you. Remember, this is what Robert left in the note. This was the climax of the story, that moment when she was completely crushed, and that's what she's thinking of now. He did not know. He did not understand. He would never understand. Okay, so I'm thinking about Robert in this moment. He doesn't even know what she's about to do. Perhaps Dr. Mandalay would have understood if she had seen him. So maybe she has a brief moment where she thinks to herself, I could be better. I could be happier if only I had help. But she didn't see him. It's too late now. The shore was far behind her, and her strength was gone. She's going to drown. She looked into the distance, and the old terror flamed up for an instant and then sank again, drowning. Edna heard her father's voice and her sister Margaret's. She heard the barking of an old dog that was chained to the sycamore tree. The spurs of the cavalry officer clanged as he walked across the porch. Remember, this was the first man she had an overwhelming crush on, where she felt so much passion for somebody. There was the hum of bees, and the musky odor of pinks filled the air. And she is gone. There are a lot of important questions about the ending of this book. Critical questions. Is she a newborn creature if she stands there naked, swimming out into the water? Or is she a child? Is she being childish in that moment? People debate. In the context of this story, is her suicide heroic? Is she a tragic heroine? Or is it a cop-out? And what I mean by context is the time period, the late 1800s. Women really didn't have any freedoms. They were possessions of their husbands. So is she making a statement for all women that there is no freedom? That the only option is to die if you can't, if you're not happy being married to your husband? Or has she given up? Is there a path for her and she has just quit? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer here. I think these are just worth considering. Is she selfish or is she a victim? Is she taking the easy way out? Is she being too self-centered, or is she truly, powerless? Also, important questions. I want to know, why is there so little focus on her actual successes? She is making money with her art. That's hardly mentioned, but she is making money. Dealers are coming and they're purchasing her artwork. She is living alone. So she has managed in many, many ways to create the life she wants for herself. Why is she only feeling self-actualized through Robert? That to me seems very old-fashioned. That to me seems naive. It doesn't seem like an independent woman. She doesn't really know. She doesn't want to marry him either. But what does she want? She can't define it because her society doesn't give her a template for how to define it. So in many ways, we could say that she is trapped. Is that what Kate Chopin wants us to believe? That she's trapped? It's possible. Some things I've read say that she has to die because of the sins that she has committed. In this time period, society would not accept her because she has cheated on her husband more than once. And of course, that's why Madame Ratignolle sneaks over to visit her, because she doesn't want to be associated with that shame. She seems spiteful in some ways. She also seems unliberated in some ways. So she hasn't succeeded in what it is she's after. As I mentioned before, I do wonder how Robert will feel when he discovers that she has died in this way. It's logical that he would blame himself for having left her in that state. I think it's important to recognize here that Edna's suicide does not seem planned. It does not seem like she went to Grand Isle to commit suicide. It seems like she went there truly to rest. And I mean, I don't think she's ordering fish for dinner and expecting to stay there while secretly intending to kill herself. I think that she literally swam out there and it came over her. Like, it happens to her while she is out there in the water. I think it's also important to ask yourself, is she ultimately weak? Was her earlier strength of character naive? Was she sort of putting on airs to be independent, but it wasn't genuine? Or she didn't know how? These are the kind of things I think you could talk about in class, you could debate. People could definitely stand up for her, saying she did all she could and there was no more she could do. Others would say she could have done more. I think it's too easy and wrong to judge her, especially us here in 2025. I mean, we just don't know what it would have been like to be a woman during that time period, especially a Southern woman, where there were even more sort of like expectations imposed upon her. I want to point out to you again this other book that I have referred to. It's the Norton Critical Edition, and I know you can see I have all these things flagged. I just wanted to point out a few things I marked here from other writers. So, is this the first one? This was the first one I wanted to show you. We had someone, I don't know who these people are, but George Spangler has a critical essay about the ending of the novel, and some of these things I just sort of talked about too, but I just want to show you some sort of outside references. This is the part about Edna has sinned in thought and deed against accepted sexual morality, and for the average reader of 1899, her sin required that she suffer and die. That is what people would have judged her so harshly that would have been her only option. It's also, I think, important to notice, and I know I have a lot of other things I've read that have said this too, that the public did not welcome or praise Kate Chopin's book. They were hostile to this subject of a woman who is striking out on her own and, defying society's expectations. The book was withdrawn from the libraries of St. Louis, which is where Kate Chopin is from, and she was denied membership in the St. Louis Fine Arts Club because of the scandal around this book itself. For the final pages, Edna is different and diminished. She is no longer purposeful, merely willful, no longer liberated, merely perverse, no longer justified, merely spiteful. and the painful failure of vision, or more likely of nerve, implicit in the change prevents a very good, interesting novel from being the extraordinary masterpiece some commentators have claimed it to be. So this is one person's opinion. This is not fact. This is someone's opinion of this book. People really do debate the ending. I ask myself, like, what? And Edna has to win? Maybe. It's not possible for Edna to win. I think that's a worthy thing to consider. Another part here, let me see if I can find it, was here. This author was Susan Wolkenfeld, about the suicide specifically. And she talks about other critics who say that the significance of her suicide and the assumption of Chopin's sympathy for her protagonist, it relates Edna's romanticism to the transcendentalist theme of self-discovery. So many of you will read this as part of a transcendentalist unit in school, and perceives her suicide as the consequence of her realization of her essentially solitary nature, that she can't really integrate into society, that she has no choice. Stressing Chopin's philosophic concern with the relation of the individual to external reality, he evaluates, this critic, Edna's final act as a defeat that involves no surrender. So she's failing, but she's not giving in. Subtle difference. Arms, this is an author, another critic, despite the basic realism of Edna's sexual emancipation, sees her as a figure motivated by romantic ideals who drifts aimlessly into death. And that is how it's described. It is described as if she aimlessly goes that direction. She is much more motivated by romantic ideals, which is not maybe so much of what modern women become later. Her suicide is a regressive act coming from a sense of inner emptiness and a failure to fulfill in real life her infantile yearnings for fusion, which is sort of a reference to Freud. So, and at the end, there is a lot of reference to her childhood, like that maybe she's childish in what she's wanting. And I would say that's fair. She's ignorant of how to attain it. Her life has been very limited. What are her resources for knowing how to become an independent person? The reader's response to Edna's suicide depends on whether he or she is compelled by the voice that indulges a romantic vision of life's possibilities, or by the contrasting voice that insists on accommodation for the limitations of reality. Like, there are limitations placed upon Edna, and perhaps that makes the romantic vision always going to be a failure, So the realism of Chopin and the romanticism of Edna is kind of like what's sort of being juxtaposed here, because Chopin seems to be saying that there was no hope for Edna. Perhaps it is because she's romantic, or maybe it's because Chopin is commenting on the real issues facing women in society, which I think is probably the more important point. Otherwise, why would other people have rejected her book and called it disgusting? Because it was threatening the status quo. Ultimately, Chopin places Edna's suicide as a defeat and a regression rooted in a self-annihilating instinct, in a romantic incapacity to accommodate herself to the limitations of reality. Like, she can't seem to be practical and figure out a way to be independent within the constraints of society. Again, I wish Kate Chopin were alive to tell us. This book didn't get, notable credit and acclaim until after Kate Chopin had passed away. So we don't know, this just really does make us want to really, I think, delve into the history of this time period and what women were experiencing. It also downplays her artistic success overall. There's definitely, no sense that Edna herself is successfully an artist, and honestly, even Kate Chopin. I mean, this is an incredible piece of writing, even though it's provocative for that time period. I believe that Kate Chopin should have received more credit than she did. And then finally, I just wanted to take a look here at what Chopin seems to say are two paths available to Edna from the point at which her instinctual nature is roused. Ideally, Edna's growth could bring her to self-awareness and community with the external world. Like, she could grow into someone who's a leader, who strikes out on her own and sets an example. But aware of the complex and vulnerable nature of the human psyche, Chopin emphasizes the perils that attend Edna's awakening. Like, it's not like you just are a leader on day one. People struggle to become that. Unconscious, to return to the primal sea in which body and soul are one, where there's no influence by society. This symbolic invocation of the seductive sea that calls one to the ecstasy of immersion corresponds to Freud's conception of the oceanic feeling of absolute fusion with the infantile ego. So it's like back to that childhood again. So it's like she can't handle the challenges of her awakening. If you think back to that first swim, she achieves her first mastery over the ocean and swims out in a spirit of self-assertion, but her instinctual intoxication also makes her open to the regressive urge. As she swam, she seemed to be reaching out for the unlimited in which to lose herself. So even on that first time she goes swimming, she kind of wants to escape. Edna's regressive instincts are embodied in the series of fantasies of unattainable lovers that dominated her early life. So there's a whole lot of that in the beginning of the book. And she thinks about that one man, the cavalry officer, right before she dies. So these fantasies and this romanticism within her, perhaps that's her downfall. That could be argued for sure. So you can see here, just as you look at all this, look at all of these various essays from other people. People really do debate what is the ultimate message, what is Edna's tragic flaw. In case anyone is interested, the Norton Critical Edition looks like this. I really do hope you have enjoyed this book that has made you think. I know it can be challenging. I know it doesn't always appeal to men, but I do really believe it is an incredible, it just gives us incredible insight into a time period that was very, very complicated for all people, not just women, but most certainly Kate Chopin has shown how it was complicated for women.